विद्यार्थी विद्यार्थी और हमारे मुख्य अतिथि का आज स्वागत है, अभिनंदन है। हमारे नेशनल कोऑर्डिनेटर अमित झा और डॉक्टर विनोद तिवारी जी, तो मैं सभी से अनुमति चाहूंगा कार्यक्रम प्रारंभ करने के लिए।
मुकेश सर, बस सर करेक्ट हो रहे हैं, थोड़ा सा 1 मिनट और ले रहे हैं।
जी।
सर आगे सर बहुत स्वागत आपका कार्यक्रम में।
एक बार पुनः कार्यक्रम का प्रारंभ करने से पहले सभी को शुभ संध्या और हमारे सभी मेंटर्स, शिक्षक, विद्यार्थी और शोधार्थियों का इस कार्यक्रम में हार्दिक स्वागत है, अभिनंदन है। आप सभी का यहाँ इतनी बड़ी संख्या में उपस्थित होना वास्तव में ऊर्जा और उत्साह से भर देने वाला है। कार्यक्रम की शुरुआत करने से पहले मैं आपसे एक छोटा सा प्रश्न पूछना चाहूंगा कि आप में से कितने लोगों ने कभी रिसर्च ग्रांट के लिए आवेदन करने का सोचा है? बहुत शानदार। और अब कितनों को यह प्रक्रिया थोड़ी जटिल, लंबी या कंफ्यूजन वाली लगी? तो आज यही वजह है कि हम सभी यहाँ एकत्रित हुए हैं, क्योंकि सीखने की चाह रखने वालों के लिए हर दिन नया अवसर लेकर आता है। तो इसी के क्रम में इस 15 दिवसीय फैकल्टी स्टूडेंट डेवलपमेंट प्रोग्राम में हार्दिक स्वागत करते हैं, क्योंकि जब शिक्षक और विद्यार्थी साथ सीखते हैं तब ज्ञान अपनी सर्वोत्तम अवस्था में पहुंचता है। और आज के 7वें दिवस का विषय है ग्रांट प्रपोजल मास्टर क्लास विनिंग स्ट्रेटजीज फॉर रिसर्च फंडिंग। आज के प्रतिस्पर्धी शोध वातावरण में केवल एक बेहतरीन विचार होना पर्याप्त नहीं है। असली चुनौती है उस विचार को एक मजबूत, प्रभावी और फंड मिलने योग्य प्रस्ताव में बदलना। और इस महत्वपूर्ण प्रक्रिया को समझने के लिए आज हमारे बीच उपस्थित हैं डॉक्टर विनोद तिवारी। नमस्कार सर।
नमस्कार संतोष सर, हृदय से धन्यवाद
जी। मैं सर का एक संक्षिप्त परिचय देना चाहूंगा कि सर डॉक्टर विनोद तिवारी सर भारतीय प्रौद्योगिकी संस्थान BHU वाराणसी में फार्मास्यूटिकल इंजीनियरिंग एवं प्रौद्योगिकी विभाग में एसोसिएट प्रोफेसर के रूप में कार्यरत हैं तथा न्यूरोसाइंस एवं पेन रिसर्च लैब का निर्देशन करते हैं। डॉक्टर तिवारी का प्रमुख शोध क्षेत्र क्रोनिक एंड न्यूरोपैथिक पेन की न्यूरोजैविक प्रक्रियाओं का विश्लेषण और इनके प्रभावी एवं ट्रांसलेशनल उपचार विकल्पों का विकास है, जो वैश्विक स्तर पर अत्यंत महत्वपूर्ण स्वास्थ्य चुनौतियों में से एक है। डॉक्टर तिवारी का वैज्ञानिक कार्य बहुविषयक समन्वय पर आधारित है, जिसमें वे न्यूरोसाइंस, मोलिकुलर बायोलॉजी, फार्माकोलॉजी एंड एडवांस ड्रग डिलीवरी सिस्टम को एकीकृत कर दर्द नियंत्रण संबंधित जटिल तंत्रों को समझ के प्रगाढ़ करते हैं। आपका यह अंतर विषयक दृष्टिकोण नवोन्मेषी उपचार रणनीतियों की खोज को सुदृढ़ करता है। डॉक्टर तिवारी ने PhD पंजाब विश्वविद्यालय चंडीगढ़ से प्राप्त की तथा इसके उपरांत जॉन्स हॉपकिंसन यूनिवर्सिटी स्कूल ऑफ मेडिसिन अमेरिका में प्रतिष्ठित पोस्ट डॉक्टरल फेलोशिप पूर्ण की। IIT BHU में नियुक्ति से पूर्व आप नाइपर अहमदाबाद एवं नाइपर गुवाहाटी में महत्वपूर्ण शैक्षणिक एवं शोध दायित्वों का निर्वहन कर चुके हैं। आपका योगदान वैज्ञानिक के रूप में आपने पेटेंट, राष्ट्रीय स्तर की विभिन्न समितियों में सक्रिय सहभागिता, विभिन्न इंटरनल और एक्सटर्नल कमिटीज में आपका प्रतिभाग है। आपने 100 से ऊपर अपने शोध पत्र प्रकाशित किए हैं और 20 से ऊपर आपके पेटेंट्स हैं और ग्रांट्स हैं, जिसमें आपने अपना योगदान दिया है। आप बायोसेफ्टी और एनिमल एथिक्स से संबंधित ढांचों में नेतृत्व आपने किया है आपका। साथ ही आप रॉयल सोसाइटी ऑफ बायोलॉजी उत्तराखंड UK के फेलो हैं तथा IASP और आइब्रो जैसी प्रतिष्ठित संस्थाओं से अंतर्राष्ट्रीय फेलोशिप एवं सम्मान प्राप्त कर चुके हैं। डॉक्टर तिवारी का उद्देश्य उच्च स्तरीय प्रमाणिक शोध को आगे बढ़ाना तथा उभरते वैज्ञानिकों और नए वैज्ञानिकों को उत्कृष्टता एवं अनुसंधान नैतिकता के साथ प्रशिक्षित करना है। आप भली भांति जानते हैं कि जो आज का विषय है उसके बारे में आप विस्तृत रूप से हमें अपना मार्गदर्शन प्रदान करेंगे, क्योंकि आपको पता है कि रिव्यूअर जब हम कोई ग्रांट के लिए अप्लाई करते हैं तो वो सिर्फ एक भाग्य की बात नहीं होती, उसके लिए एक पूर्ण तैयारी, योजना और सटीक प्रस्तुति करने के उपरांत ही ये परिणाम प्राप्त होता है, जिसके विषय में आप भली भांति जानते हैं कि किसी भी ग्रांट को प्राप्त करने के लिए रिव्यूअर्स क्या देखते हैं, किसी भी प्रपोजल को किस प्रकार से स्ट्रॉन्ग किया जाता है और कौन कौन सी ऐसी गलतियां जिनसे हमें बचना चाहिए जब हम ग्रांट के लिए अप्लाई करते हैं। तो आज के सत्र में हम सीखेंगे एक प्रपोजल कि हाउ टू स्ट्रक्चर ए कंप्लीट प्रपोजल, कि कैसे एक प्रपोजल को स्ट्रक्चर देना है, उसको कंप्लीट कंपेयर करना है, हाउ टू क्रिएट ए रियलिस्टिक एंड कन्विंसिंग बजट एंड व्हाट रिव्यूअर्स एक्सपेक्ट एंड व्हाट टर्न्स ए गुड आइडिया इनटू ए सक्सेसफुल ग्रांट। सो मैं आज के सभी कार्यक्रम में सभी वक्ताओं से, श्रोताओं से, जो हमारे एक विद्यार्थी भी हैं, शोधार्थी हैं, उनसे अनुरोध करूंगा कि डॉक्टर तिवारी जी के मार्गदर्शन में आप सीखने की कोशिश करें, और जो डॉक्टर तिवारी से आपको कोई भी प्रश्न रहेगा वो कार्यक्रम के अंत में आप उनसे पूछ सकते हैं। तो आइए, मैं टीम फार्मालोक की ओर से डॉक्टर मुकेश शर्मा, डॉक्टर तिवारी सर और यहाँ सभी उपस्थित प्रतिभागियों का हार्दिक और उत्साहपूर्ण स्वागत करता हूं, और मैं निवेदन करना चाहूंगा डॉक्टर विनोद तिवारी जी से कि वो इस कार्यक्रम में अपने विचार, अपना जो एक्सपीरियंस है वो हम सभी से शेयर करें। डॉक्टर तिवारी सर।
नमस्कार संतोष सर। सबसे पहले मैं फार्मालोक का, अमित जी का और जितने भी मतलब ऑर्गेनाइजेशन धन्यवाद व्यक्त करना चाहता हूं कि आपने मुझे यहाँ पे ग्रांट राइटिंग के ऊपर बोलने के लिए आमंत्रित किया। तो जैसा कि आपने बताया कि आज हम ग्रांट राइटिंग के बारे में बात करेंगे, जो कि बहुत ही इम्पोर्टेंट विषय है अगर हम रिसर्च की बात करें, चाहे हम अपने देश के अंदर बात करें ग्रांट की राइटिंग की, या फिर हम देश के बाहर जो साइंटिस्ट हैं, रिसर्चर हैं, उनकी बात करें। आवश्यकता है, चाहे हम रिसर्चर हैं, साइंटिस्ट हैं, एकेडमिशियंस हैं, प्रोफेसर्स हैं, किसी प्राइवेट इंस्टीट्यूट में या फिर किसी गवर्नमेंट इंस्टीट्यूट में। अच्छा, मैं एक बात समझना चाहूंगा, यहाँ पे जितने हमारे जुड़े हुए हैं, जितने भी हमारे विद्यार्थी अध्यापक गण हैं, तो वो सभी क्या दोनों लैंग्वेज में कंफर्टेबल है, हिंदी और इंग्लिश में? अगर मैं इंग्लिश में कंटिन्यू करूंगा तो कंफर्टेबल है?
सर आप अंग्रेजी में ही अपनी बातों को रखें।
ठीक है, धन्यवाद, वही समझना चाह रहा था। ठीक है, तो आपके पास जो भी क्यूरीज होंगी आप उसको नोट डाउन कर सकते हैं, और टॉक के लास्ट में हम विल डिस्कस इन डिटेल। I hope my screen is visible to everyone. Okay, good. Thank you. So as you know, Dr. Santosh mentioned in the beginning, today we are going to talk about the grant writing, why it is important, why we should talk about this topic, and then how to write a effective grant, winning grant. What are those strategies which can make an effective grant proposal so that you can secure the funding for your research. So I come from BHU, IIT BHU, बनारस हिंदू यूनिवर्सिटी, जहाँ पे की फार्मेसी एजुकेशन की शुरुआत हुई। जैसा आप सभी लोग जानते हैं, प्रोफेसर महादेव लाल श्राफ सर, जो कि फादर ऑफ इंडियन फार्मेसी भी हैं, उन्होंने सन 1932 में फार्मेसी की नींव रखी थी BHU में। तो मुझे सौभाग्य प्राप्त हुआ कि मैं इसी विभाग में कार्यरत हूँ और सेवाएं दे रहा हूँ अपनी। Okay, so before we talk about like how to write an effective grant, first of all, it is very important to understand what is a grant, right? Sometimes we say it is a project, sometimes we say it is a proposal, sometimes we say it is a grant. So what are these different terminologies, whether they are same or different, we need to understand it. So when we are talking about grant specifically, right? So whether it is India or we are talking about any other country like US, Europe, Canada, Australia, all the researchers, all the academicians, faculties, professors, they are completely dependent on the research grant to carry out their research work. Okay, so it is simply a mechanism by which an agency, here we are talking about the funding agency, which awards the money to fund a research study or other activity such as an educational program. So grants are not only funded to conduct a research work or a research study or a research project, right? It is also funded to conduct any educational event. For example, you want to conduct certain faculty development program, right? Sometimes you want to conduct a conference, sometimes you want to conduct a hands-on training workshop, or sometimes you want to conduct some kind of service program. All these things, they require money, so that you can pay for the travel of the speakers, you can pay for the consumables or the equipments which are required to carry out the particular research project. Okay, so it's simply a mechanism, which helps scientists to secure the money to carry out the research activities. Now the next question is why to apply for a grant. It is as simple as we have discussed already, right? It is very important, without money, you cannot carry out any research project. That's why, the institute who are well funded, if you talk about our country, the institute like ISC Bangalore or IITs or some other institutes like Pharmacy Institute, talk about NIAPAS or some other institute, like they're well funded by the central government. So they have all the facilities, infrastructure, which is required to carry out the good research, right? So it is as simple, like if you don't have money, you cannot set up the research lab, you cannot hire the manpower, you cannot hire the technician, or also you cannot buy the consumables or the chemicals, sometimes expensive antibodies, sometimes other expensive ELISA kits. So all these things require money, just like we need money for our other things also, like survival, right? In a similar manner, to carry out a good research, you need to have a good funding. So why do we need a good funding? So that we can advance the scientific knowledge in a particular field and can also advance the professional career. What do we mean by advancing the professional career? Because, these days, if you talk about India or US or any other country, the career of a scientist or an academician is not only depending on his teaching, like the skills or the criteria, it also requires that one should have a good CV in terms of research. They need to have good publications in their CV. They need to also have a good track record of securing the funding from the national or the international funding agencies. At the same time, they need to have certain patents. They need to have also a certain technology transfer. If they have transferred some, like technology to the industry, in our case, pharma industry, right? So that is very important, and for all these things, we need the funding. And the grant means that experts in that particular field, they acknowledge your idea as important and worthy of public or private supports. So you need to understand that if you're submitting some grant proposal, it doesn't mean that it will be funded. The most important thing is that the grant should be significant in terms of meeting the societal need. Every country has different problems. Sometimes every state in country, they have different, they have different, basically what? Requirements or the problems of their particular state. So in that case, they need to work in a particular area, particular field, which will be funded by the government agencies or sometimes by the private sector as well. And a grant means an enhanced prestige of your institution. This is also important. If some institute has a lot of principal investigators who have secured a lot of money, so that also adds to the reputation or the prestige of the institute. Next, grant also means contribution to the financial health of a department, a school or agency. Here, school means not the school where, like we talk in terms of India, we talk about like 10, 12 or below than that, right? A school in terms of research schools. If you go to the other countries, there they call it like school of medicine, school of nursing, school of engineering, something like that, right? So in that way, they are talking about the the financial health of the department or the institute or the school particular department, right? Now, why it is important? In India, if you see in most of the institutes, the salary of the faculty or the scientists, is coming from the government money. They're mostly in the permanent position, and they don't have to worry about their salary because it is paid by the government, right? And secondly, if we talk about the fellowship of the PhD students or the students, who are had by the institute, they are mostly paid by the government again. For example, in our case, the TAC, the teaching assistant seat, which is PhD seats actually, they are funded by the Ministry of Education. So here another manpower which is very important. The graduate student, PhD student, they are also being paid by the government basically, right? And then you need, and also the infrastructure sometimes is provided by the institute or by the government money. But you need to secure the funding if you want to carry out your research project, because you need to buy the chemicals, consumables, some other equipments, right? Which are very expensive sometimes. But if I talk about other countries, I was in US for my postdoc for around like 4 and 5 years, and I observed the mechanisms there very clearly. There definitely, the infrastructure is very good, no doubt. But if you don't have money, if you don't have grant, you cannot survive even a single day. Without grant, without funding, the institute will throw you away until unless you are not in the tenure track position. And it takes many, many years for a faculty to go to the tenure track position, where even if you don't secure the project, still you will get the salary. But in the initial few years, your salary also comes from your grant. Not only your salary, the salary of your manpower, the PhD students or the postdoctoral fellows who are working in your lab, their salary also comes from your grant. So you can just see the situation is completely different if you talk about Indian scenario versus the American scenario or some other countries, So you need to have a big grant which can cover the salary component of yours and also your students or your fellows. And it also covers the salary of some other manpower like grant manager or other technician in the institute, and some part also goes to the institute as the overhead budget. So that goes here also, but sometimes institutes are very generous in India. They give the part of the overhead budget to the faculty. For example, in IIT, if you're having some grant, so 10% or 20% of the grant will go to the institute as overhead. But out of that 20% overhead amount, institute will give to the faculty as a PDA, which is professional development allowance, which is also major amount in terms of, if faculty want to, purchase something for their research or for their work. So yeah, so the condition is different, but definitely if you secure the money, the grant, it helps in improving the not only the prestige, but also the financial health of your institute. And a grant also means new opportunities for your research assistants. For example, you have many PhD students in your lab, right? And if you don't have a grant, then it's very difficult for you to do a good research project. That's why, most of the time, people always recommend that if you want to go for PhD, go to the good institutes or go to the good labs, which have a lot of funding, because there you will have the more opportunities, to work on the exciting project, which are well funded by the money with the PI has received in terms of funding. Because without money, nobody can purchase the expensive consumables, antibodies, or other like things which are important. And once you carry out the good work in your PhD, then you will have a good CV in terms of publication, patents, and then the next roadmap will be very easier for you when you want to go for postdoc or other opportunities. And it also means a new program that otherwise can be too expensive for your institution to support and implement. That is true not only in India, but also abroad as well. If somebody doesn't have a grant, institute cannot support for a long time. I know in US, when you join as a assistant professor, kind of, on contract, so for the initial 3 to 5 years, institute will support. If they see potential in your application, in your CV, they will support your research for initial 3 to 5 years. And they give you ample time and support so that it can secure funding from the external agencies like NIH, which is National Institute of Health, which is the major funding agency in United States of America. But even these 3 to 5 years, if you are not able to secure the money, in that case, after 3 years or 5 years, they will say you tata bye-bye. That means you can go to your home and take rest. We have provided you enough resources, enough support, but still you are not able to generate the own funding. So the environment is highly competitive outside. So every country, every place has their pros and cons when it comes to research funding, and it is highly competitive. If I talk about the success rate of any funding, any grant, then it is highly competitive, almost 10%. That means out of 100 applications, only 10 applications are generally funded by the funding agencies. That I'm talking about US and other countries also having the same scenario. That means 90 applications they got rejected. So you can just understand, if you want to win top 10 to secure the funding for your research grant, your grant has to be really good in different manners. Now, the next question is, why to start them now? If you are a new faculty who has joined our institute, or you come to your country after pursuing postdoc and you join our institute, the question, why to start now? Because grant writing is an important part of your professional growth strategy. It should become a long-range plan for your professional growth and development. The very first point why you should start now is it helps to build the individual credentials. So if you are able to secure the initial funding for your lab, for your research, that means it helps you to increase your CV also, but at the same time, it also helps you to set up your lab and build up the resources and the infrastructure in your lab. It also helps you to build a track record of funding, because whenever so funding is like a continuous process. It's not like that you got 1 or 2 funding and then you can just sit and relax. If you want to do the good research, then you have to continuously secure funding after 2 or 3 years, again and again, so that you can continuously keep on doing the good work. So reviewers, the funders, they look at your CV, how much experience you have in terms of securing the funding in the past. And if they find that, okay, you have the previous experience of successfully securing the funding, and not only securing the funding, also how successfully you have carry out the projects in the previous funding, like in terms of completing the aims and objective which you have proposed, in terms of publications, and what is the quality and the number of publication, also in terms of patents or the technology transfer. So based on all those points, the funders, the reviewers, they are going to evaluate your application and then decide whether to give you the next funding or not. It also helps you to work on teams with more experienced researcher. You have the money, you can collaborate with the scientists, senior scientists within your institute or outside the institute, right? And then it also helps you to develop a plan for long-range personal development. Definitely, if you have a funding, then it helps you to grow, professionally as well and personally as well. Now the question is, what do you see in this picture on the right-hand side? There's a tree and here's a dog. What do you see? This dog is trying to climb the tree. क्या लगता है आपको? Can a dog climb a tree? No, not possible. It's not possible for a dog to climb the tree, right? So the reason is that, no matter how good your idea, in this case, no matter how good you are in your skills, like this dog, right? You cannot climb a tree if that is not something which is, which is part of your, like a skill set. So similarly, no matter how good your idea is and how well written your proposal is, आपको तो लगेगा आपका आइडिया बहुत अच्छा है, आपको लगेगा आपका प्रोजेक्ट प्रपोजल बहुत अच्छा है, you have a very good ample amount of preliminary data, then why it is not funded? The reason is that इससे कोई फर्क नहीं पड़ता आपका प्रपोजल कितना स्ट्रांग है, कितना जस्टिफाइड है, कितना लॉजिकल है. The most important thing, if your proposal doesn't meet the interest of the funding agency where you are applying, then your project is never going to be funded. So funding is always equivalent to your interest plus the interest of a funding agency. So what does it mean? It means that you need to figure out, what is the interest of a particular funding agency. For example, Indian Council of Medical Research, ICMR, Department of Biotechnology, DBT, ISRO, ISRO, right? Indian Space Research Organization. So if you submit a proposal which is related to, like, for example, the astronauts, and you submit it to ICMR, do you think they'll fund it? No. But the same proposal will be funded to the ISRO, then the chances of fundings are high. So you need to understand the mandate of the funding agency and then develop a proposal according to their mandate. And at the same time, the project has to be really good. It's not only that you are meeting their interest, the project has to be good in terms of idea, in terms of novelty. Okay, so then the likeliness of funding that project will be high. Now, in this slide, I want to show you a couple of funding agencies which are quite active in our country, India, in terms of giving the money to the different scientists, in different parts of the country. So most of the grants in our country, these days still, it mostly comes through the various government agencies. The very first example is BIRAC. आप लोगों ने नाम भी सुना होगा. It is a Biotechnology Industry Research Assistant Council. Their job is to, fund the project which are mostly industry oriented, and then they want to have a joint project, which is based on mutual interest between a academic partner, like a faculty professor in some institute, and then some industry partners, some scientists working in the industries. And then they fund it if they found the project is novel and relevant. Similarly, Defense Research and Development Organization, which is DRDO. So that is, other funding agencies, which funds a lot of projects which comes in the domain of defense related work. In IIT BHU also, we have a center for the DRDO, and several faculties in one institute, they are working in different areas related to the defense, and they are carrying out different DRDO projects, and they're collaborating with the scientists at different centers of the DRDO within the country. They have their own lab, DRDO have their own labs. So our faculty, they're collaborating with them. Similarly, CSR, Department of Ayurveda, Yoga, Naturopathy, Unani, Ayush, that is another major funding agency, which fund the project related to the traditional system of medicine like Ayurveda, Unani, Naturopathy, Homeopathy. So if you have certain ideas, if you have collaboration with the scientists or the faculties who are working in the Department of Ayurveda, Yoga, Naturopathy, then you can come up with a joint proposal. And Ayush, is particularly, interested in funding those kind of projects. Similarly, DBT, Department of Biotechnology, Department of Science and Technology, TIFAC, Science and Engineering Research Board, which is now known as ANRF. So now the name has changed. Indian Council of Medical Research, ISRO, ISRO, and some state governments as well. If I talk about Uttar Pradesh, in Uttar Pradesh, we have Uttar Pradesh Council for Science and Technology. In short, we call it UPCST, or you can call it CSTUP also. So they also fund some of the relevant projects which are related to the need of that particular state. Also, the amount given by the state government is not very high, but it is still, good enough to carry out or generate the preliminary data related to certain ideas of the project. Apart from that, not only the government agencies, there are other, like foundations or some other agencies which help quite, in terms of giving the money to the scientists, like Wellcome Trust DBT Alliance. So this is a partnership between the DBT in India and Wellcome Trust, which is based in United Kingdom, UK, and they provide funding, a good amount of funding for carrying out the biomedical research projects and also the fellowship to the scientists, who want to work in India. Similarly, there is another foundation which is the name is Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. They fund a lot of projects not only in India but in other parts of the world as well, and they give the grant for the innovative solutions in global health and development. So their idea, they should look at the idea and they should found it novel, along with novel hypothesis, and based on that they support these proposals. Similarly, National Institute of Health, as I mentioned, NIH supports is a major funding agency for the United States, but there are certain fundings or grants which are open for the international scientists as well. So whether you are in India or some other part of the country, you can try to submit a joint proposal with some US institute, and you can secure a good amount of funding from NIH as well. So this is another, collaborative research funding opportunities, which I want to share with all of you, like Indo-US collaborative research program, where faculties, they submit the joint research collaboration between the Indian and the US institution in biotechnology, in biomedical sciences, environmental sciences, and various other scientific disciplines. So you need to have some partner over there in some good institute, and they fund good amount of money to carry out the collaborative research program. In the similar manner, there are Indo-German science and technology, like UK-India Education Research Initiative, UKRI. Apart from that, there is Indo-Russia program. Then there are a lot of uh, of funded project with other countries, where our country has MOU with their government, and the faculties from both the countries, they submit a joint proposal, and the committee found that the project is significant and novel and can make a good outcome in the future. They support that kind of project, although the number is quite few, but still it is a very important in terms of developing the international collaboration as well. And in those projects, our students and the faculty members from India can go to their lab for a duration of from few weeks to few months, and can learn the techniques and program over there. And also they can come to our country, our institute, and can learn from us whatever we have to offer to them. Apart from that, there are several private foundations as well, like all over the world, which funds a good amount of money, like more than 700,000 plus US foundation. They offer the grant to not only institutes, but also to individuals and also to other non-profit groups. And generally only independent foundations and community foundations provide the grant to the independent investigator. There's philanthropic funding also, which is very popular, especially in US and other parts of the world, where people have money in their family, and they want to donate it actually for the good research, and that is other philanthropic funding is a very good source of basically very good source of funding in other parts of the world. In India also there are certain groups which gives the philanthropic funding, but the trend is still not very encouraging. So I hope in future more and more people can come up and they donate to the institutes or the government so that research can be progressed in our country. Apart from that, there is another funding which is known as CSR funding. The full form is corporate social responsibility. So our government has given a mandate to all the industries, all the corporates, that they should donate one part of their profit to the academic institutes or for some social work. So if some institute they approach these companies or pharma companies, what they can do, they can try to get this CSR money. So that is another opportunity which one should tap. Apart from that, there are large corporations who are interested in testing or evolution of their own product, and the private sector is a potential source of funding. So here, there are several companies, like for example, you can see here Procter and Gamble, or other big companies, or also some small scale companies also who don't have their own labs, but they act as a mediator. They do have the ideas. They have good people who have some ideas, and they want to implement those ideas and want to come up with some molecules or some technologies. So what they will do, they will develop that idea, and they will hire some like company, or they will hire somebody to synthesize those particular molecule for them, and then they will hire someone or they give the project small project to some pharmacologist, so that they can test their molecule for the safety and efficacy. And afterwards, when they have all the data with them, they apply for the bigger funding utilizing that data, and then they further go for the clinical trial testing in humans using that data. So this is how people try to generate the funding. Many times the problem is that people don't know what are the different sources of funding which they can apply. So first of all, it is very important. You need to understand why funding is important, and then what are the different sources of funding. So once you know these are the different sources, you need to understand what are the criteria, by which you can attract that funding in your lab. So here I want to share some of the examples with you where certain pharma companies, they have given a certain consultancy project. So that's one of the pharma company who wanted us to test, one of their product, the code name is this, which is having methylcobalamin, right? And they want that, we should test this molecule, for different safety and efficacy studies. And they pay you quite good amount of money for the testing in the animals or in the in vitro setup. That is another, like consultancy project which has been funded to our lab, I think last year only, where we are supposed to test, certain molecules which they have synthesized from some other, like company, and then they expect us to, test those molecules in the different pharmacological setup in the animal models, and they provide the money for carrying out those work. That is another consultancy project which we have received from the same company. So now after this, we need to understand what is the project contest for the grant application, or what are the different, you can say basically pros and cons, and how to decide how to write a good grant application. So you need to write these, remember these 4 words, SWO, so, right? So S means the strength. So you need to have a clearly defined goals and values, and also you need to have a strong connection with the community, global network, and transparency, and your staff should be trained. So these are the different strengths, which will make sure that your project will succeed. Next is a weakness. If you are not able to brand your project, or if there's no involvement of any community, if there's lack of accountability, or your fundraising efforts are minimal, you're not putting your efforts, or if you're lacking the skilled manpower, who will carry out that project. So all these are limitations or the weaknesses associated with your grant. Next is the opportunities. That means expansion of the opportunities so that you can have the increase in number of foundations and the donors for your research project. So that depends upon your outreach, how much you can outreach. And then you can also open the alliances with the other organization. And sometimes you can take the media support also for marketing your research. But there are certain threats as well. You might have your competitors within the institute, outside the institute. Sometimes there could be a scenario of economic crisis. Sometimes, operational issues are there due to several things. Like recently, if you remember, when there was some political tension was going on between India and Pakistan. That time, I remember one of our grant was, in a sanctioned stage, with Ayush. But what happened during that time, because government didn't knew that what will happen overnight, right? So they stopped all the grant sanctions, and they gave the notice that, okay, until things are not clear, all the sanctions will be on the hold. Because sometimes there is a war, then government has to, put all the money towards that cause, and sometimes that hampers the growth of the country and their people also, right? So war is never a good idea. So sometimes other issues, like if the project gets failed, that can also be a bigger threat for the funding. And then sometimes lack of media support. If you're not able to, uh, generate the information and tell the people how this project is important, then it's difficult to get the attention from the funders, especially private funders. So now the question is, what are the different types of projects that can receive the funding easily, right? So the first is the projects of high scientific caliber. It's very important, right? And most of these projects are investigator initiated. That means some of the PI is involved in developing the idea and then putting it, framing up in the form of project. But the most important quality of any project, any grant, is the uniqueness, or you can say novelty, right? So by law, funding agency cannot support a project which is already funded or paid for research that has already been done. It is very, very obvious when we are talking about the publication, right? We always, what we do, we ask our student to do a thorough literature review to find out if somebody has not worked on that molecule in that particular disease in the past. Because we knew that if the literature review is weak, then the student may start working on a project which is uh, already done by someone else. So there is no novelty in that project. Similarly, if you talk about the grant, then it's very obvious that it has to be novel in terms of hypothesis, in terms of concept, and it should not have been done by somebody else, because funding agency cannot fund one project twice, whether to different PIs in the world or in the country, right? So the project has to be novel and unique in terms of things. Now next comes the competition. Yeah, we know that every funding agency, not only in our country but in other parts of the world as well, they receive the funding, or they receive the thousands of applications, and for each application, they have different round of reviews, and funding on the first attempt is always very, very difficult. But I would say it is not impossible. I still remember after pursuing postdoc for 4.5 years around, I came back to India. First, I joined NIPER Ahmedabad as assistant professor of pharmacology and toxicology. Then I put my very first grant, which I initially submitted when I was doing my postdoc in US. So I was applying for faculty position there as well, but suddenly I decided to come back. So that project was not funded in the US, and I got very good comments from the reviewers over there when I was in US. But then I came back to India and I refined the same grant and rewrote it in a different way, making sure that it meets the criteria and also the requirement of a country. And I was very happy that I on the very one go I received that funding from the SERP as an early career research grant. So that's why I said that it's not easy to secure the grant in the very first attempt, but it's not impossible even. So even the best idea will not be funded unless it matches the interest of a funding agency. So it's very important that whatever you're putting, it should match the interest of the funding agency. And most of the time, competitive ideas must reflect both contemporary thought in a field and the interest of the funding agency. If these both things are matching, then the chances of securing the funding is high. Then you also need the more planning, basically. You should know what is the institute policy, in terms of proposal development, or whether they can help you to expedite the process, or is there some manpower who can help you to prepare the budget and then complete and submit the application, right? Look, in India, I know if you want to submit a grant, then you have to do everything, starting from generating the idea, framing the proposal, and then preparing the budget part, and then submitting the online project application. But I do remember when I was in US, when we used to submit the grant over there, at that time there are people who are known as grant managers, which are hired by the institute. And whenever you are writing the grant, they will help you from the day one in terms of guiding you. What is the deadline of the application? What is the requirement of the funding agency? How you should write the grant? And till the submission of the application, they will help you at each and every step. And that's why that position is known as grant manager, because they help you to put the grant, and also when the grant is funded, they help you to manage that grant, the budget component and the other issues related to the grant. So this is how the institute level involvement is important. At the same time, if your research proposal involves human subjects, you should plan ahead for its approval by the institutional review board prior to conducting any type of research. Okay. Otherwise, sometimes you get the money and then you don't have the approval from the respective committees, and unfortunately, you cannot start the project. But most of the time these days, if I talk about funding is like ICMR, DBT, they ask you to provide the ethical approvals, whether it is animal study. If it is an animal study, then they ask you to provide the institutional animal ethics committee approval. If it is a clinical study, they ask you for human ethical committee approval. And without those approval, they are not sanctioning or they are not transferring the money to your institute account. So it is very important to plan ahead of this. Now the next is searching for the grants. So you need to determine what type of grant you will be using and which type of funding agency is most appropriate to fund this particular kind of research. And you can search for the proper grants through various funding agency websites. You can Google, or you can even ask AI these days. Like, it can help you a lot. You ask them what are the different funding agencies in India who can find this kind of project which I'm planning to write, and then they will give you a list of funding agencies which are interested in your research work. And once you have identified the grant, read the detailed requirements and instructions carefully and follow the instructions exactly. Okay. Now, writing a grant. So as I told you, writing a grant is not a joke. It's not that easy. So if you want to write a grant, it is more difficult, much difficult than writing a publication. And you need to make sure that you have to write again and again until you come up with a very good grant proposal. And you know that writing takes time, right? So you need to plan a complete a schedule which you can follow so that you can write a well-written proposal which should be clear, focused, and precise. However, if a proposal is poorly written, then it will limit the chances of having a competitive idea funded. It's very important. It doesn't matter how good your idea, if you're not able to pen it down attractively, nicely, then that kind of project is never going to be funded by the funding agency. So how you're putting it in the form of proposal, writing it's very important. So these are some of the tips for the effective grant writing. So the very first thing which you can do when you are about to start the grant writing, follow an outline. And then you also prepare the figures, tables, and images before you actually write your proposal. So to have an idea, how it will look. And then be accurate, clear, and consistent. And the thing is that you should use the words correctly in the proposal. And it is always recommended to use the sentences of only 17 to 23 words. So the sentence should not be less than 70 words or should not be more than 23 words. Because if the sentence is too less or too little, then you will not be able to communicate the message effectively to the reviewers, to the experts. And also, if your sentence is too long, more than 2-3 lines, more than 23 words, then also the actual meaning of that paragraph or the sentence will be lost. So these both conditions are, not good. So need to have the words in a sentence which range from 17 to 23 only, so that you can effectively communicate your message to the experts. Then you can start paragraph with clear, informative topic sentences. Also think about the style and also know when to avoid highly technical language, because the people who are sitting over there who are reviewing your proposal, they may not be working exactly in your area. For example, I work in the field of neuroscience, and in neuroscience also I especially work in the field of chronic pain neurobiology and development of new drugs for the development for the treatment of different pain disorders. Now, if the language is too complicated or too technical, then the person who might be sitting as a reviewer may not be working in the field of pain or the neuroscience. He might be a pharmacologist, he might be a formulation scientist, or he might be a chemistry person, right? So if your language is too complicated, too technical, then the person is never going to appreciate your work, because he will not be able to understand what you are doing and what you're proposing. So it's very important sometimes to write it, in the layman language, so that anybody can understand your idea. So next is basically any research proposal must be hypothesis driven. So hypothesis, you already know what is hypothesis. We will discuss it in the upcoming slides also. At the same time, it has to be concise and focused, and most importantly, it should come up with the preliminary data. Without preliminary data, any proposal is highly unlikely to get accepted. And you should also spend most effort on the experimental plan, where you are trying to restate the hypothesis again, okay? And then you also present the rationale of your study, why this study is important, and then describe the research plan in detail, followed by description of the methodology, and then provide a rational plan for the failure. Like if the project doesn't work out, or if particular objective doesn't work out, how to take care of that. So mostly in that case, the good scientists, what they do, they provide the alternative plan or the potential pitfalls, something like that, against each and every objective and the sub-objective. So when examiner, when an expert will look into a proposal, they will get an idea, okay, this person, this scientist is smart, he or she already knows that if this particular objective will not work out, then what could be the alternative experiment. So this is what you should follow. Now the question is, what is hypothesis and why it is important? So we have to define it. Any hypothesis is a proposed explanation for a phenomena, right? So the hypothesis has to be very, very specific and the focused. And you're not supposed to just use a technique to address an experimental area without having a good formulated hypothesis. So here, fishing trips will not work. So if you really want to get a funded project, you need to write a good hypothesis, which is based on solid, evidences in terms of data or other preliminary work by the scientist. Now, what are the different components of a grant proposal, right? This page is very, very important. This slide is very, very important. You need to understand. Any effective grant proposal has these, different heads. So the very first heading is the specific aim. So do not give more than half page to concisely define what you intend to do and why. So that will talk about the specific aims which you want to address in this proposal, or you can say in alternative language, the problem which you want to address. Then the next section comes, which is known as background and significance. तो इस सेक्शन में आप क्या बताएंगे? इस सेक्शन में आप लगभग 1 से 1.5 पेज का स्पेस ले सकते हैं, and then you should try to discuss the origin of the problem. So in the aims, you're talking about the objective or the problems, how you're going to address that, but in the background, you're going to talk about the actual problem, what is the problem, and then you can also talk about why there's a need to do the more research on, on this particular area. And then you should also talk about the current, like therapeutics or the limitations associated with those therapeutics and technology, so that people can understand like why you are still working in this area. Okay, or there are certain issues, limitations with the current therapeutics, the current solutions are not effective. That's why you want to offer the new solutions. So that is a part of the background and significance. Now, next comes a very important part, which is the preliminary data. And most of the faculties, scientists, they do this mistake. They just propose a project and they don't put any preliminary data. But it's very important because preliminary data gives the confidence to the experts, to the reviewers, okay, that this particular lab has the potential or the facilities or the infrastructure to carry out this kind of work. So preliminary data is very, very important, and you can dedicate 1-page section, to support your hypothesis. Okay. And then next comes the experimental plan, where you can take almost 2 pages, and then you actually explain how you plan to attack this particular question or the problem which you are highlighting in the background and significance. So in experimental plan, you are going to basically discuss about the methodology or the ways to address or attack the problem which you want to address. So if you talk about the specific aims, that means you're talking about the overall hypothesis, and then you talk about the inner background, and then write down the specific aims of your proposal. And in most of the cases, these aims can be divided like anywhere from 2 to 4. So if it is a short proposal, you can just write down aim 1 and aim 2. But if it's a big proposal, then you can go up to aim 3 and aim 4 as well. But sometimes the aims further have their own sub-objective or sub-aims. Like, for example, aim 1 may have aim 1A, 1B, 1C. So depending upon the problem you want to address, you can have the specific aims and sub-aims under the same heading. Now, next comes the background. Why it is important, I already told you. So, be a scholar. That means be very, very, particular what you are trying to write in the background section, where you can provide a good overview of the whole research field in which you are proposing the project. And then you also supposed to, uh, discuss about the gaps in the knowledge. That means the limitations in that particular field, which are going to fill with your proposal. And this particular, section will set up the whole stage for your whole grant. So you have won half of the battle if you can effectively, work on the background part, because that is the main, I would say, starting point of your grant, where you're trying to convince the expert that, okay, this is a problem and this problem doesn't have an effective solution. And this is a solution which I want to offer. And this is how my solution is different from the existing solution. Not only different, also better. So that will, provide the motivation to the experts to take interest in your project proposal. Now, next comes the preliminary data. As I told you, preliminary data, you know, uh, uh, is not possible in every grant to put it, but depending upon the scenario, most of the funding agencies, they appreciate, that you should have a preliminary data in your grant proposal. Because as I mentioned, if you have a preliminary data in your project, then it shows that the technique has worked for a related project. So that gives the confidence to the reviewer. And also it suggests that the hypothesis which is proposed is sound and better. So in that perspective, preliminary data is important. And it also gives the confidence to the experts that, okay, this project is working and has a potential. And also the lab has all the infrastructure and facilities to carry out the proposed project work. So that means these people are not talking in air. They have the concrete facilities, infrastructure, equipments, and that's why they are able to generate this much data. So that in the future also, they'll be able to carry out this project very, very effectively. So in that way, preliminary data is a very important criteria. Now, what are you really going to do? So that is, the next part of the grant proposal. And it is also known as the heart of your grant application. But many people spend so much time on the background and the preliminary data section that they run out of steam. They get tired, because they have already spent a lot of time on the objective part or on the preliminary data part, that they don't write much on the, like next section of the grant proposal. But it's very important. It's a heart of a grant. So what you can do in that, you can provide the outline for your experimental approach. So what you can do, you can restate each specific aim at the beginning of each section. For example, if it is aim 1, then you talk about what is aim 1, what problem you want to address and how you will address the aim. And then if required, you can go for further sub-aims like aim 1A, 1B, something like that. And then you also need to restate the hypothesis for that particular sub-aim, and then provide a rationale for that particular sub-aim or aim. And then provide a detailed plan for the experiment in that particular section, that, okay, this is the problem in terms of aim 1 or aim 1A, 1B, and then this is how I'm going to answer this question. Then you should also talk about the expected outcome from that particular aim or sub-aim. And then make sure that you include alternate plans if the selected approach doesn't work out or fail down. So most of the people lag in these, like 5 or 6 points. What they generally do, they propose the aims objective, they talk about the hypothesis, they discuss about rationale, and then they, after, completing the experiment, they just, put the detailed plan, but they never talk about what will be the expected outcome. They never talk about if the project fails, if the experiment doesn't work out, this particular objective doesn't work out, what could be the alternative plans. So that should be included as a separate subsection as a potential pitfall and the alternative plans, so that reviewers have confidence in your knowledge and in your perception, like how you look at the grant proposal. So these are some of the grant proposal, which I want to share with you. These are the different projects which has been funded to our lab time to time. So the very first project was funded from Department of Biotechnology, and this project is ongoing in our lab, where we are trying to see the cellulose-based, scalable luminous photonic biopolymer for the sustainable films and coating. So that's a good amount of grant, almost 60 lakh, which has been funded to Dr. Pardudhar with our colleague in Department of Biochemical Engineering. At the same time, there's another grant, which was just finished, in 2024, where I was working with Dr. Amba Kumar Rai in MNIT Allahabad, and where we were trying to study the effect of, linoleic acid, in the hamster model of visual leishmania. Apart from that, we had another grant by state government, and I told you they generally don't fund as good as central government, but they still do pay some handsome amount of money by which you can at least generate a preliminary set of data which can be developed into a complete proposal in the future. Apart from that, we had another grant from ICMR, then the Prime Minister's Fellowship to one of our PhD students, then co-research grant also we get from SERV, which is NRF right now, and we completed this project, just last year, and it was mainly on the development of novel therapeutics for the reduction of frostbite and burn injury pain in the military veterans. Most of the military veterans, they are sometimes deployed at the high altitudes where the temperature is very severe, like Siachen glaciers, Karakoram ranges, right? So the temperature sometimes is like around minus 30, minus 40 degrees Celsius. So if those, military veterans, they don't take care of them, then sometimes they can develop the frostbite injuries, and which can lead to the serious issues. So that one of the projects which was funded by the SERV, which is known as NRF now. These are other projects, which has funded time to time in our lab. So this is another project funded by internally by the institute, and this was from the John Hopkins. So I just wanted to share with you that if you have a good idea, and if you know how to place that idea, and if you have a strong methodology, then I think getting it funded is not a big deal. So my strong opinion, suggestion to all of you, if you really want to, secure the funding for your lab, develop some expertise first of all, and make sure that you have the desired infrastructure and facilities in your lab. And if you don't have all the facilities and infrastructure, then try to collaborate with the people in other departments or the other institutes which have those facilities, and try to come up with some joint proposal. These days, the funding agencies in India, they also looking for the collaborative projects, which are known as multi-institute projects. Even ICMR support those kind of projects where you can propose a big idea, and then a lot of institutes, they are coming up together, and then they're submitting a joint proposal. So you might have certain expertise, but the other person may have certain expertise. For example, I work in a pharma department where we develop the molecules, we test the molecules in the in vitro and the in vivo system and the different animal models, right? But then when it comes to the clinical testing, that we cannot do in our institute because we don't have the hospital, we don't have those facilities, right? So in that way, we have to collaborate with the doctors, clinicians, who can help us to test those, formulations or the molecules in the human models. And ICMR, they do support those kind of clinical studies also. So with these words, I would like to, again, thank Amit ji and Santosh ji for inviting me and interacting with all of you. And I just want to end my talk with a small quote that anyone who stops learning is old, whether at 20 or 80. And anyone who keeps learning, they always stay young. So learning should never end. Thank you so much. If you have any comments, any suggestions, any queries, I would be happy to, answer your queries. And welcome to Varanasi. If you are here, feel free to come and visit our department as well. Thank you so much once again.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. तो मैं अभी अपने लिसनर्स से जो रिसर्च स्कॉलर्स हैं या फिर स्टूडेंट्स हैं, फैकल्टी मेंबर्स हैं, अगर किसी प्रकार का कोई क्वेश्चंस है तो वो अपना चैट बॉक्स में क्वेश्चंस लिख सकते हैं, जिसके आंसर हम डॉक्टर साहब से पूछेंगे. तब तक मैं थोड़ा इस जो आपका वक्तव्य था उसको थोड़ा समराइज करने के प्रयास करूंगा. आपने बहुत ही प्रिसाइज तरीके से, बहुत ही गहराई से इन सब लिमिटेड माध्यम से आपने श्रोताओं को इससे अवगत कराया। तो जैसा ही कि आपने ही बताया कि रिव्यूअर आपकी कभी लैंग्वेज को नहीं देखते, रिव्यूअर हमेशा आपकी क्लैरिटी ऑफ विजन को देखते हैं कि आपका प्रपोजल किस विजन से है, आपका प्रपोजल उनके विजन को मैच करता है नहीं करता है। और ग्रांट क्रेडिट प्रपोजल केवल एक डॉक्यूमेंट्स नहीं है, इसमें आपके विजन्स हैं, आपके सपने हैं और आपका कैलिबर है कि किस कैलिबर से आप उसको प्रोजेक्ट को पूरा कर सकते हैं। इन सभी चीजों को ध्यान में रखते हुए ही कोई भी ग्रांट है जिसको सफलता प्राप्त होती है। और किसी भी ग्रांट को पूरा करने से पहले हमेशा एक क्वेश्चनरी भी तैयार करनी चाहिए कि हम किस किस तरीके से अपना उसको पूरा कर रहे हैं, क्योंकि कोई भी रिसर्च है वो हमेशा क्वेश्चन से ही प्रारंभ होती है। और अभी एक लिसनर का क्वेश्चन है कि जो पूछ रहे हैं कि जो पोस्ट डॉक एडमिशन जो आईआईटी में है आफ्टर फार्म डी के लिए, तो उसकी एलिजिबिलिटी क्या है सर?
There's a question by Ms. Shweta Kulkarni. She wanted to know what are the eligibility criteria for postdoc admission at IIT after pharma PhD. So look, there are several options and opportunities through which you can enter the postdoc program at IIT BHU. So IIT BHU have their own postdoc fellowships also, but they are very limited in terms of number. They're highly competitive. So if you want to do postdoc at IIT BHU, not only IIT BHU, maybe at any other IIT as well, right? IIT Mumbai or IIT Delhi, then you should first try to approach the principal investigator or the professor over there who are working in your area of research and try to ask them if they have any projects of, because what happens, sometimes we have the projects in which we have the money for the research associate, which is kind of postdoc position only. And these days ICMR is also funding very good, so one can hire postdoc their ICMR grants as well. So and most of the time, if we get the project in which there is postdoc position, we advertise it through the institute webpage. Also we advertise it through LinkedIn. So make sure that if you're interested in particular area, particular lab, be in direct touch with them. Feel free to write them email, don't hesitate. Most of the time, we are not able to secure the opportunity because we hesitate to contact the people. We have a lot of like hesitation in mind that whether we will get the response or not, but don't have that kind of hesitation. And ask them if there is any opportunity in their lab and follow them through LinkedIn or other portfolios so that they should their advertising time to time.
Sir, one more question. Basic accreditation for pharmacy college for funding grants is needed.
Do we need accreditation for funding agencies, if any, please? So I am not sure. Like this question is not very clear to me by Rajendra ji. What do you mean by this question? Like, do we need accreditations for funding agency, if any? Look, if you're working in any institute, then if this institute is, like approved by different agencies, like, if it's a pharmacy institute, then it's very obvious that it should have a affiliation by Pharmacy Council of India and other agencies as well, right? So sometimes funding agencies look at those, affiliations and approvals as well, right? So if your programs are, approved by the regulatory authorities or not. So in that case, I think it's yes. I'm not sure whether I'm able to answer your question correctly or not, but yes, the approvals of the regulatory authorities, agencies, in your area is required, and funding agencies look into that.
One more question, sir. Student Shakshi Singh asking, right. I want to inform from IIT for development.
Right. So there is a question by Sashish Singh that I want to do inform from IIT for development of medical devices. So can you please thank me for joining this? So she's a B.Pharm 4th student. So let me tell you one thing. IIT BHU is the only institute in the country which offers the pharmacy program. Only IIT. There are other institutes like NIPERS, which offer pharmacy programs, and other universities as well. But in terms of IIT, we are the only IIT which offers the pharmacy program. So if you want to do M-Pharma, then basically you have to qualify the GPAT. That is a mandatory requirement. Whether you want to do the medical device kind of research, whether in IIT-BHU or at NIPER or any other institute, you need to qualify the GPAT first with a good rank. Apart from that, NIPER, they have their own written examination if you want to secure the master degree there, and IIT-BHU, our institute, also have their own written exam. So the only way to get into the master's program at good institute is that you study well in your undergrad, in your B.Pharm, so that your concepts are very clear and you should be able to crack these written exams with good rank.
थैंक यू सर, आपका मार्गदर्शन के लिए बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद। आज का जो हमारा विषय था आपने उसको बहुत ही अच्छे तरीके से सभी श्रोताओं को आपने अवगत कराया। अब मैं अपनी टीम से अनुग्रह करूंगा कि वो डॉक्टर विनोद कुमार जी का जो सर्टिफिकेट ऑफ अप्रिशिएशन है वो डिस्प्ले करने की कृपा करें।
There is one more question from Rajendra ji. I'm sorry to interrupt you. I think he's asking, in phytochemistry, can you suggest other than Ayush funding agency? So, of course, Ayush is the major funding agency, which supports the research related to the Ayurvedic formulations, not only phytochemistry, the Ayurvedic formulations or, kind of traditional system of medicine. But if you are, working on some molecules which are obtained from natural sources, then it doesn't mean that you should submit only to Ayush. Even ICMR or SERB or other funding agencies are also interested, because there are many natural molecules which are, developed from the like plant sources or marine sources. They are in the market currently for the treatment of several diseases. And you know about one of the drug, which is anti-malarial drug, right? Which was discovered by scientist Yo-Yo too, and she got the Nobel Prize for that, discovering that molecule. It's an anti-malarial drug, right? So yes, if you're working on natural molecules, phytomolecules, phytochemicals, then of course you can submit to multiple funding agencies, including Ayush, ICMR, DBT, NRF.
थैंक यू सर, बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद सभी आदरणीय मेंटर्स का, सदस्यों का, जो शोधार्थी रिसर्चर्स का और स्टूडेंट्स फैकल्टीज का इस कार्यक्रम के लिए। शुभ रात्रि।
एक मैं आपको थोड़ा इंटरप्ट करना चाहूंगा, शायद राजेंद्र जी का एक क्यूरी और है। आई एम रियली सॉरी, एंड अगर आपको और भी कोई क्यूरी तो आप मुझे बाद में भी कांटेक्ट कर सकते हैं। मैं अपना ईमेल आईडी यहाँ पे टाइप कर देता हूँ, आप भी मेरा ईमेल आईडी पार्टिसिपेंट से शेयर कर सकते हैं।
जी सर।
आई अंडरस्टैंड कि बहुत सारे लोग हैं जिनको बहुत सारी क्यूरीज होती हैं और दे आर नॉट प्रॉपर्ली एड्रेस्ड एट मेनी टाइम्स, सो दैट्स माय ईमेल आईडी। एंड ही इज आस्किंग लाइक दे हैव अप्लाइड several times, but their grant was rejected every time for various reasons, right? So I completely agree with your point, Rajendra ji, and it happens, with us also. Even being in IIT, we submit our grant proposal and it was rejected. This time also I submitted 2 grants in ICMR and both of them got rejected, right? But my earlier grant, like in 2024, it was approved by ICMR. So there are many reasons for rejection. As I told you, first you need to really have a good project, good idea, good hypothesis, and methodology you are adopting. It has to be really sound. But at the same time, if you are not meeting the mandate of the funding agency, then it doesn't matter how good your grant, it is never going to be funded. But at the same time, try to have a collaborative institute with you, and if your expertise are complementary to each other, but I'm very sure that if your project is good, it may be rejected one time, but one day, it will definitely fund it. And try to get the comments from the funding agency. That is another irony in our country, But these days, funding agencies, they are rejecting and then providing the comment as well for the improvement of the proposal. So you can definitely, just type Vinod Tiwari IIT BHU on LinkedIn, and you will easily get my LinkedIn profile from there.
Okay, thank you, sir. Thank you so much. Shubh Ratri.
Shubh Ratri.